Howdy y'all, it's Kate from The Lifestyle Lady. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to try our first ever cooking, aren't we?
Yeah.
And I got my assistant here, my daughter, and what we thought we'd share with you is a cake we're making for my husband's birthday, which is today, which is why we're sort of in red because it's the same day as Valentine's. And the cake he always requests every year is one that's in my mother-in-law's cookbook, and it's a Moroccan orange cake. I think it's a relatively old recipe, and it's, if you can hear a noise in the background, it's my dog. Why she's chosen now to do beepy toys, who knows? But one thing to know about the Moroccan orange cake is that it is gluten-free. It could be served as a dessert or as a cake, and it's really scrummy, and he requests it every year and everyone in our house loves it. So we thought we'd share with you how we do it and the recipe, and hope you enjoy. So what's the first thing we do when we go cooking?
Wash our hands.
So that's what we're going to do, and we'll see you back here later. What's great about this recipe is that you can make them in individual portions, or what we're going to do today, one big square cake. The recipe calls for a 23cm cake tin, and so I'm going to use this. First thing I'm going to do is just use a wee bit of olive oil spray before I line it. Just give it a good, probably not the thing for the camera. Just going to give it a quick line, quick zhuzh, and then I'm going to measure out and line it with some greaseproof paper. So I'll check back in a minute. Is to set your oven for 180 Celsius or 365 Fahrenheit, 360 depending on your oven temperature. So I've already done that, and it's starting to warm up so that it's ready for the cake to go in. I really love these springform tins because you can do what I call lazy lining. You can just line the bottom with a stronger piece. It's not going to be high enough to affect the top of the cake, and when you take off the outer shell, you just be able to lift it up and let it cool down. So that's a great tip. One thing I really enjoy to do with my daughter cooking wise is a really good way of teaching all about numbers, particularly measuring stuff out all ahead of schedule, which is something I tend to do now because I've learned that cooking with a little one following a recipe is not always conducive for a perfect result or even reasonable result. So I'm going to measure everything out with her help, and then we're going to add everything at the end. That works best for us. These weighing scales, if you don't have ones like this, I highly recommend investing in them. They're not hugely expensive. It's really good. They're digital. It's a really good way of learning about numbers, and she tells me when to stop, don't you?
Yes.
Welcome back, and welcome back to my kitchen. I've now measured out all the ingredients, and which my daughter's got very bored, so she'll probably want to come back when I'm mixing it all together. I'll share with you what I have and what's here. So I thought I'd share with you what I've measured out. In here we have 300 grams of caster sugar. If you're in the US and find it hard to get caster sugar, you can either buy extra fine granulated sugar, or if not, just pure cane sugar, and then whiz it up for a few seconds in a food processor. That's 300 grams of that. I have 5 large eggs, organic eggs. I always buy organic eggs, and one was a double yolker. If some of you are smart and you count, there's more than 5 there. So I've separated them with whites with yolks. Then I also have in here 350 grams of ground almonds, which obviously form the gluten-free element because we're not using flour. Then we have 4 tablespoons of breadcrumbs. Now it does call for fresh breadcrumbs, and I would make them if I had guests coming or whatever else, but I'm just using plain breadcrumbs that I got from the grocery store. Then it calls for 3 tablespoons of baking powder, which I haven't measured out, but I can do that. It also calls for half a teaspoon of almond essence, which I've got here, which again I will measure out. Then it calls for the zest of 2 oranges and 1 lemon, which I've got in here. Which brings me to this: if you don't have one of these fantastic zesters, I strongly suggest you invest in one. It is phenomenal. So that's the ingredients required to put the cake together. Next I am going to make the cake. This is my bowl. Before anyone thinks it's dirty, it's not dirty. It has a tiny bit of orange zest in it. It's not dirty. It is an antique from the UK. It's an old baking bowl, and I just love these old-fashioned bowls. They're just beautiful. The thing you do with this recipe is mix all the dry ingredients. So the caster sugar, we're going to add the ground almonds. We're going to add the breadcrumbs. Okay, I think you get a good view there. Again, just to recap, I have the ground almonds, I have the caster sugar, I have the baking powder, and I have the breadcrumbs, and I'm just going to give them just a very quick whiz round. Now, just an aside, this is just maybe personal preference. I really love using plastic spatulas to bake and cook. I go through quite a lot of them. I just really think it's easy to clean dishes out, and I just really enjoy using them. So I give it a good mix to make sure that all the ingredients are well combined. Now that's done, I'm gonna mix up the wet ingredients and I'm gonna come back to you. So now I'm gonna amalgamate all the wet ingredients. That's gonna be a more exciting task, and I'll report back. Once you amalgamated all your dry ingredients, it's now time to add all the zest in, and again, give it a good mix to make sure it all mixes through well. This is why I love to use these plastic spatulas, because you can really scrape around the bowls and get them get every last morsel out of zest, because zest being slightly damp tends to attract and get stuck to the sides of the bowl, and this way I can make sure that I got because really that with the juice is what really gives it that kind of aromatic and orangey taste. So the wet ingredients involves the eggs, both the yolks and the whites, the sunflower oil, which I've measured, which I don't know if I forgot to mention in the ingredients. You have, I believe it's 400 milliliters of sunflower oil, and also the almond extract. So I'm just going to do that now, and then I'll get back to you when I'm whisking. Speak to you in a minute. So I've add all the wet ingredients. I'll recap on that. It's egg whites, egg yolks, the oil, and the almond essence. And in fact, I was a little bit cheeky and didn't measure completely the almond essence, so you might have had a little sneaky bit extra. I'm a bit like that with booze too, when I add booze to my recipes, but I really like almond, and I know that my husband does too, so that's why I've done it. And you can see they're all in here, and now I'm just going to give them a bit. I'm going to go and get a whisk and give it a good whisk around. And the almond gives it such a lovely smell. It's so fragrant, it's lovely. It reminds me kind of a Christmassy or Bakewell tarts. Are they a big thing here in America? They're huge at home. I know my husband loves a Bakewell tart. The next important thing is to add wet to dry. I know that different recipes, particularly in baking, it's always different, but this recipe calls for wet to dry. So I'm about to do that, and I will come back to you. So I'm back. I've just added the wet to the dry, and of course, as always, the battery of my camera ran out. Why is that always when your hands get dirty? So I've changed that dilemma, and I'm now with you. I'm going to mix the recipe together. So it's just a case of mixing it. So I'll come back to you when I've mixed well. I have mixed it well, and added it to the cake tin. Now some notes just to understand is that when you mix it or add it to the cake tin, it does feel much denser than, say, a sponge mix, because the ground almonds are heavier. It has more of a sort of heavier dessert feeling to it. The cake tin. Now all I have done is just use the plastic spatula just to help it to guide it to the corners. I don't like to mess around too much. And the only other thing I tend to do is just, sorry for the noise, but just give it a bit of a bash on the side just to remove any air and to sort of even it out. I like cake mixture to kind of work itself as much as it can, because I think if you fiddle with the cake mixture too much, it can affect the results. Now to the oven and leave it and put it on a timer for about 45 to 50 minutes and see how we do. My oven is fan assisted, and I put it a tiny bit higher than the recipe recommends. So 45 minutes probably will do it, but we will wait and see. I will report back to you guys, and we'll make the second part, which is the syrupy topping, which really gives it that aromatic flavour, and it's delicious. See you in a minute. So I've just put it in the oven. You can probably see it if I guide you. It's in the oven there on a baking sheet, just because I don't like it in case anything spills out or splatters. I try and keep my oven clean as much as I can, because I hate a filthy oven. Now I'm going to make the syrup, so I'll report back in a second and show you what you need for that. Hi again. So I'm going to show you in a minute everything I've put in the saucepan to make the syrup. The only thing I haven't added is the orange water, which I add at the end after the spices and the honey and everything have had time to really infuse with each other, because I find that is so potent, the orangey sauce. It kind of stops the infusion, and it's important to give the spices time to have that time to really add some flavour to the cake. Here I have, or I'm supposed to have,
2 star anise. Now I'm struggling in the USA to find star anise, so I had to use anise seeds, which is a compromise. But is there anywhere I can buy star anise? Anyway, we also have 2 cinnamon sticks, 4 tablespoons of honey, the juice from the 2 oranges and the 1 lemon, which I use the zest for in the cake. And I also have 4 cardamom pods, which I have slightly bashed with a knife, just to break the seal a little bit and add to the flavour. I'm now going to put my mixture on a low heat which is here, I don't know if you can see, for about 3 minutes, and I'll report back. The other thing I try not to do is to interfere too much with mixing it. I try not to use metal spoons or anything like that, because I think it affects the flavour. I give it what I call the Lifestyle Lady jiggle, just to make sure that the honey doesn't burn or stick to the bottom of the saucepan. But I certainly haven't got it on a particularly high heat, because I just want it to warm through slowly. So if it takes more than 3 minutes, then I'm okay with that. I'm just going to cover it with some kitchen paper and let it infuse for quite some time, probably a good hour or so while the cake's cooking. I'm probably going to let the cake cool down, but I'll come back to you guys to show you what I do next and how you amalgamate the syrup and the cake and all that sort of stuff. And now's the fun job, clearing up. So I just removed my cake from the oven. I checked it at 45 minutes and it needed another 10, but at 55 minutes at 365 seems to be perfect. Turn my oven off and let me show you. It did stick a tiny bit when I opened the oven at 45, but when I put the skewer in, it comes out clean, perfectly clean, so it's great. So the next thing I'm going to do is hold this up and just do a lot of different skewering or poking or whatever you want to call it. So the next thing I'm going to do is add the orange water to the syrup, which has been infusing over on my hob. I couldn't find orange water, which is what the recipe asked for, so I used orange extract. So the recipe asked for 2 tablespoons of orange water. What I'm actually going to do is just 1 tablespoon of orange extract, because I think it's going to be stronger and I don't want to be too overpowering, and I also don't want it to taste too artificial. I want the flavours and the spices from the real oranges and the lemons and the cardamom and the anise and the cinnamon and everything to really shine through. So I'm just going to add that to the syrup and I'll come back to you. The next thing to do is to sift the syrup onto the cake, getting it round. Now you can see why I like to have a baking sheet underneath. So I'm going to do that, and I'm not sure how I can do that with the camera, so my tripod's not strong enough, so let me see what I can do and I will come back to you. Now you can get a bit concerned as you pour it on, that you think, oh goodness, this is actually going to saturate and make the cake waterlogged, but that's what you want. And you wouldn't believe how much of the liquid it just absorbs. So now I'm going to leave it to cool down in the tin for a while, probably about 20 to 30 minutes, and see how warm it is later. And then I'll come back to you and show you the finishing results, sort of just trying to decorate it. Reasons, this is not a beautiful cake. This is not a Fiona Cairns or any of the sort of Insta cakes where you think, oh my lord, or desserts where you think, oh, that is like food porn on a plate. This is not that, but it tastes delicious. It's slightly unusual. What I like about it is you can serve it with Greek yogurt or ice cream, whatever your thing is, or just plain. And again, as I said before, you can serve it as a dessert after a dinner party or when you've had friends for dinner, or you can serve it as a birthday cake. It's up to you. And what's also great is it lasts several days in the fridge. So it's a winner all around, really. So you could make it ahead, which is, if you're a mum or a busy person, that's a win-win, right? So I'll get back to you in about half an hour when the cake's cooled down. Okay, so we're at the final stage for the cake now. I'm going to take it out of the case. Now release the catch to loosen the sides, and now with a palette knife I'm just going to go round and just loosen the sides a little bit, because it is a little bit sticky now, and that's because of the juices and the honey and all that. So I've released the cake tin, and one thing I will tell you, when you really push the release so it springs out, go again around with a palette knife and push quite hard so you can feel the bottom of the tin, because it does get quite sticky. So here we go. You can see the cake, and in a minute I've only got one pair of hands, so I'm going to lift it, and you can now see why I suggested using the additional greaseproof paper. I'm going to move it. I'm going to put it on this board. Now, if I was entertaining in some spectacular fashion, please, this is just breadcrumbs from the cake, I would, of course, use some fancy platter. But Mr. L, I hope, won't mind, but it'll be easier for storage for me to put it directly on there. Now, I am going to agree, it doesn't look the prettiest cake, but there was a little piece attached to the outkins of the spring, and it was so delicious. And I'm really looking forward to having some this evening. So I've moved it onto the board. I'm now going to leave it to cool down. It's still a little warm underneath. Using the greaseproof paper means the tin is kept very clean. And this dish underneath, I literally keep in the base of my oven to catch any spills. I mean, I do wash it, but that's why it looks so stained. So I'm just going to leave that for a while. And then I'm going to put some candles on it and probably do a sprinkling of powdered sugar or icing sugar, and then maybe put on some fruit on top. So I hope you enjoyed my first kind of come bake with me or bake along with me. I'm sure I've got lots to learn. I'm sure the zooming wasn't right and everything, but this really was a quick kind of sort of trial go. I will enclose some pictures of it being eaten or the cake later on at the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed, please do so. I have lots of different kind of content, and I'd really appreciate you joining us. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy the rest of your week. Ta-ta for now.